There's really not enough charge in it to care.
Probably not. Okay, couple quick announcement things before we start the training for tonight. Is anybody going to be missing next week that you know of?
Don will be.
Don will be? Okay.
He will be. You had a colonoscopy.
Oh, I'll
Isn't that
figure out a
sick?
way to get here.
Should I just write maybe Don?
I think I'll be here.
What is it, spring break? Is that where you're asking?
No,
Or-
it's just share. It's nice to know a little bit ahead so that you know what materials and things you have to bring to record it if we have to. So curious.
I should be,
I'll be here.
Perfect. Then can we talk about April 14th, that Saturday supervision day? It's a big day because it's 2 sessions,
So you're saying like 2 of these?
like 2 of these.
It's April 13th.
13, sorry, 13. Have 14 today's date in my head. April 13. It's a Saturday. Wondering for you, timing wise, what your preferences would be. The last 2 times we did it from like 9 to 11:30. Took an hour lunch. Went from 12:30 to 3. Would you rather start at 8:30? What are your thoughts? Do you want a shorter lunch? Would you rather be done earlier, be done by 2?
I'm good with earlier and shorter lunch. It doesn't matter.
Early as possible and shorter lunch sounds good to me. Are we eating here?
We are, I'll fill you in. We're going to go to Deppie's house just so that there are videos that we have to watch. It's nice to have couches and comfy places to roam and move and eat and just have it feel a little more off-site, a little more retreat-esque when it's that long. It's just us. Yep. It's just us.
It doesn't matter to me.
If you want to start earlier, 8:30.
I can go earlier.
Yeah, I'm an
But
early person too.
Some of you, yeah.
8:30 or earlier is fine with me.
Okay,
too.
we'll talk about it. I'll say that you're open to, for sure, 8:30, half-hour lunch.
Because Molly's prom's that
Ooh, okay,
But
okay.
not
No, I
night.
know, but we'll be sensitive to it. Okay, that's helpful. That's helpful for us to know that.
And Sherry's the early bird.
People are, and I think we're going to help Ron with some of it too. So just leadership power in numbers, and it's a good day. It's all about supervision. So
And we don't meet on the 11th.
no, the 13th takes the place of the 11th.
Do we meet on the 18th?
Yes, that
Okay.
one is on grief, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And Christy Egbecht is going to lead that one. Change that up a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
Yep, she did it last time for us too. She's dealt with a lot of grief in her life, so kind of neat that she was willing to take that on. So, all right, let's talk about being assertive. Let's start with some devotions, and I'll read these for us.
I know grief.
What?
Whoa.
I'm going to be assertive and say you have a wonderful wife.
I can't hit him from here.
Yeah.
Just makes
You're
sense.
kind of bold when your wife isn't sitting.
My problem is I think you side with her.
Tonight.
Yeah, that's
See,
tonight.
I'm putting mine in the front, you put yours in the
No, I was just going, haven't you learned anything in all these years of marriage?
Until I tell everybody I married up. So.
All right, let's have devotions. And my clicker doesn't work all of a sudden. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, here are our devotions for tonight. Early in the book of Acts, not long after Jesus' ascension and the day of Pentecost, Peter and John were on their way to afternoon prayer at the temple in Jerusalem when they encouraged a man who was unable to walk. Each day, someone would carry this man to the temple gate where he would spend each day seeking the generosity of those going in and out of the temple courts. When Peter and John walked by, the man requested money from them. The apostles responded with a great example of assertiveness. Peter and John did not give him money. They plainly and directly denied that request. but they gave him a different kind of help, one that was much more valuable. First, they offered him respect, honoring his presence in a way that few people would normally have done. The man's daily experience was for many people to ignore him. Most temple goers would have avoided eye contact and continued on their way. Occasionally, a passerby or two might give him some money without any meaningful interaction. Another many years of being shunned and disregarded, the man may have been conditioned to keep his eyes on the ground while making his request. When Peter and John stopped in front of this man, however, they looked directly at him, and Peter made an assertive request. Look at us. This was an act of respect. They wanted the man to know that they viewed him as a human being created in the image of God, not an annoyance of being overlooked, avoided, or shoved aside. Next, Peter and John responded assertively to the man's request. Peter said, "Silver or gold I do not have, but what I do, I will give to you. In the name of Jesus Christ, stand up and walk." With that, Peter offered his hand to help the man up. When he grabbed Peter's hand, the man's feet and ankles instantly became strong. He jumped up and began to walk. Then he went with Peter and John into the temple courts, walking and jumping and praising God. It always makes me think of that Cedarmont Kids song about this. As Stephen ministers, your assertive interactions with your care receivers are not likely to be so dramatic, but they can be just as life-changing. By speaking the truth in love, you can assertively respond to your care receivers and help them get what they truly need. And above all, you can always treat your care receivers with dignity and respect as human beings created in the image of God. That in itself can make a huge difference. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you for your example that was given to us in the Bible by Peter and John and their interaction with this man who needed the hope and the healing that only you can provide. We pray for the grace to always treat others with dignity and respect. We pray for the wisdom to respond to requests in ways that genuinely help people in the midst of their brokenness. We ask you to transform us more and more into followers of Christ who speak the truth in love, consistently relating in gentle but firm ways. We thank you for assertively providing the help and the hope that we ourselves need. And we pray that you would work through us to offer the same help and hope to others. Amen. I had not thought about that story in that light necessarily before, so I thought that was a pretty neat new perspective. All right, at the end of your last session, you got an assignment from Ron where you needed to respond assertively in a situation where you normally would have responded passively or aggressively. Did anybody do that or want to share if you encountered or I guess intentionally took the time to respond assertively to someone?
I was gonna bring up a subject that needed some assertion, but I chickened out.
I can shut the door, it's confidential. Oh, you don't have to share. No? Nobody spoke assertively?
I mean, I feel like I'm making better choices about when I just speak in general,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't say I had like one moment where it was like that tangible moment, but it was more about just trying to exercise all of it. Just because I could easily pick on my one daughter who lives at home still, where I'm just trying to say less or, but in this case, it was more about being assertive. And I can't think of one. I probably did, but I can't think of it to regurgitate it here necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But being more careful with choosing my words.
Mm-hmm.
No, I would say the same for me. These things are rolling through my head, and generally, I think less is more nowadays. Even when people are being assertive, instead of this big old,
Yep.
don't say, it's do say, and it's 2 lines and it's done. And just the being present and the this and the that, and it's just all always rolling through my head that I'm just like,
Mm-hmm. I had parent-teacher conferences last week. So those are always, right, Bob? Good opportunities to practice being assertive. And what I found, when we talk more about being assertive, I find that if I have to go towards someone assertively, that if I really think about it, kind of plan my thoughts and my words, which you take time to do before a parent-teacher conferences, especially with tricky parents or a thing about tricky kids that you need to go toward. You have to say it, right? If you're gonna do everybody the right service, you have to say the truth, but in a loving, gentle way, right? And you don't know what they're gonna grab onto, how they're gonna receive it. Prayer definitely goes into, preparing for every conference. But I find that I am not by nature an assertive person. In the background, I certainly feel like I can help people be more assertive. I feel like I often sometimes can offer wisdom in arenas, but to do it myself is hard. If I have to do it, parent-teacher conference, that looks different to me because that feels like my job and it's planned, and I sit down and I write my thoughts down. I don't always have that opportunity, but if there is time to think about it, pray about it, I feel like it goes a lot better for me because it's not my nature necessarily. Maybe some of you are more assertive and have that gift to be able to speak it carefully and truthfully and in a loving, gentle manner. I don't have that. It's not an innate quality in me. So it takes work. I have to be intentional and conscious about being assertive because I'm a pleaser by nature. So then it's hard to balance the pleasing, and yet it should all be part of that, right? But it's harder for me.
I'm a ditto for you. Your words captured what I couldn't find words to say. So
Yeah. But if I think about it and have it in my mind and then have to go toward a conversation about it, it generally goes better for me. There's less emotion.
I think I've been like Sarah, just a little more looking at myself,
Mm-hmm.
with having read this book and stuff, and just listening, maybe a little more assertive listening.
Yep.
But then also being a little quicker to listen and a little slower to talk.
Speak, right?
But then I was in a meeting this week, and then somebody else wanted to know about that meeting, and just in something that I couldn't say, but just to be able to say to them, to be very aware of how I was saying something, I think. Yeah, this has been really a good exercise.
You're going to find that as you keep going, you will become so much more, you think about it so much more. These start to become just natural rhythms for you. I used to be somebody that spoke into a lot of things, and I'm so much more quick just to listen and take it in and speak less and speak when it feels like something, should be said.
I do have a good example from this week, actually.
Go ahead.
okay.
Just talking about this made me think of it. So I have a family member who has an addictive personality and has grappled with addiction, but also even like shopping addiction. And so they wanted this model car that they saw out of a magazine. And these things are like eye candy, or like the shiny penny. Ooh, what? Oh, no.
Like a toy, like model car.
Like a toy model car.
Oh, okay.
And, it's tough because I too am like a pleaser. And as a family member, I want to say yes wherever I can. But then you're grappling with somebody who is never satisfied. So even if you say yes to this one thing, it's just the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so I also had to think a little bit ahead of time. And I had my words mapped out, and then I met with this family member and I said, look, I'm going to be, upfront on one thing. I do not think it's a good decision to buy this model car, which was a couple $100, so it wasn't like it was $20 either. So everything I'm about to say is through the lens of, I don't think this is a good idea. And then I continue to sort of lay out, we don't want to be collecting a lot of stuff at this point in our life because, none of us have an interest in model cars and, and a lot of other, and he's like, that's, I know that's a real good reason. And, essentially we were able to kick the can to Christmas. So we're going to revisit it at Christmas, which I'll take all day long.
I was going to say, just wait, honey, that's coming. What you just did speaks to some of what we're going to talk about tonight. You go toward a compromise in some things, and
You could say, we never know what to give you.
Yeah.
You just be patient. It'll be your birthday.
If we even
And
bought
Christmas
things
or
for each other,
something,
but
yeah.
we don't. So.
Yeah, I think, those are good ways, to be assertive. And I think when you speak assertively and almost have a plan or, those kinds of things, I tend to think that it goes well. As you've been thinking about this, I can tell you all have in your reading and stuff has kind of changed your thoughts. Assertiveness, for most people, it takes thought. It takes work. It can be hard. And you maybe have to be willing to change within your own personality, right? To go toward things that maybe are harder for you. Moving ahead.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
To do with it? And it says when we read it said if you don't go towards assertiveness, it can breed. I'm trying to think of some of the words it said. Resentment and
anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think if you are assertive, it kind of frees all that other bad stuff. And if you can conjure up the guts to say it, if it's not your nature,
Right.
it's kind of liberating.
Delivery is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But oftentimes people can respond negatively to you being assertive.
I know.
And
you have to be ready for that.
You do,
For
because
sure.
you might have that in a Stephen ministry relationship, depending on what you say, where they're wounded, if they're angry in their woundedness, being assertive can be hard at times. So we talked a little bit about this, what's easier, what's harder. I think we covered that kind of. So we're going to move into what this looks like, because assertively speaking, you're going to use in every arena in your life, right? And I think you aren't a Stephen ministry yet, and you're already thinking about how you use it in your life and how it works and what's hard and what's easy for you. You're going to have it in caring relationships too. And you're going to find that at times your care receiver might make requests of you. And it can range from something really simple to something that you are going to have to set boundaries around. Sherry's going to talk about boundaries next week, so that'll give you much more major insight, okay? And it's hard. When they're in a hard place, your empathy sometimes gets really big, right? And so you're going to walk alongside them in that difficult spot, and they might make frequent requests, and you're going to have to learn what is an okay request, what's something you can work through, and what are some of those likely non-negotiables in Stephen ministry, okay? So if you look at focus note 1 on page 116, it shows several requests that a care receiver might make. And these are, as I read through them, it can happen. These things will happen and can happen. Some are no-brainers. Some are like, I don't know, I'm not sure. All right, so take a minute Just read through 1 through 7, and then we'll just kind of talk about what you think about each of the requests. All right, so looking at those, generally 1 and 2, right? You could say yes or no to, depending on your availability, but it's not an unworkable thing. Definitely, easier conversations to have. The when you meet kind of thing, can we meet for an hour and a half instead of, those are workable unless it doesn't work for your schedule, right? For the third one, can you find another place to meet? Can we get together in a different spot? Generally, yes, right? And then figure out what works. What's going to be a new place where you can meet? When you get to the fourth one, you would probably say yes, as long as it doesn't become something that they continue to do. Be careful with that. I've had in the past a care receiver, I would say each of my caring relationships. Once, like at a holiday, at Christmas, received a gift from my care receiver. That felt very appropriate. The other two, kind of when we were ready to close, received, some sort of gift, and those seemed appropriate as well. But if you start to get something every other week or that kind of thing, that might be a little bit of a caution flag and something you're going to want to have a conversation about.
I kind of feel like if they're asking you should decline. If it's something that you just received at a holiday or close and they didn't ask, then it's probably a one-time thing. But I would be more wary of somebody who asks and would just see it as a good opportunity to set
some sort of boundary on that
there and just say it's not necessary.
Right.
The gift is this ministry.
Yep. And that's a great response. When you get to 5, 6, 7, those are the ones. Yes. And these are the ones that start to get into boundary issues. So when you look at 5, and they would say to you, 1 visit a week doesn't seem like quite enough. Could we start getting together 2 or 3 times a week? Generally, you're going to say no. I would say if you have a care receiver, maybe that is hospitalized for some reason or another, and maybe this one-time thing where they need a couple visits during the week because you could do 2 shorter visits or something. But as a general rule of thumb, you're going to want to try to keep it to once a week to about an hour. 6 and 7, probably not. Because once you've crossed that line, it's hard to go back. Okay. Getting into watching children, getting into some of those different things. Definitely 7. You would never meet with both. Stevens is a woman to woman, man to man. It is not more than one person. So
we can certainly set the boundaries by what Stephen's ministry is, right?
And Sherry often, as a referral coordinator, lays really good groundwork for this kind of stuff. And Bob, that's a wonderful thing to have in your back pocket. And you can assertively speak and say, the boundaries within Stephen Ministry say these are what my time commitments can be. When I committed, or when we committed to Stephen Ministry, we committed to this being a walking alongside. This goes beyond the boundaries of what this ministry is about. And you can lay it on the ministry. You don't have to lay it on yourself necessarily. And I think even bringing that kind of stuff in speaks assertively to, what's going on. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For any request, you're going to want to respond assertively, no matter if it's an easy one or a hard one. Just, I think, speaking it truthfully, frankly, lovingly, and gently, because they are typically in some sort of crisis mode. Don't be passive in it. Don't be aggressive in it. You just kind of go there and say it. But take into account their emotional state too. You may need to be much more protective of your care receiver's feelings than you would maybe for somebody else. This is a little bit of a different relationship. That doesn't mean that you grant a request that you might otherwise decline, but it does mean communicating in a way that's sensitive to where they're at, to their emotional state. And here's the best part. If things like this come up, you can always say, I need to think about that. I'm going to get back to you. And then when you go to supervision, your supervision team will help you work through all of these things. So that's a huge part of supervision. And things like this come up, not necessarily this is a boundary issue, but other things come up that you might be questioning, and your supervision team is great for this. And sometimes you might get asked a hard question in supervision too, like, oh, feels like maybe you crossed the line on that. And they'll speak assertively into your life and ask those hard questions too. And then you can, back up, and then you have an assertive conversation and say, you know what I did kind of crossed the line. Probably shouldn't have picked up groceries for you last week. That's a bit more than what Stephen Ministry is. So anyway, it's good. So let's talk about responding, saying yes to care receivers' requests. When you're in a relationship with a care receiver in Stephen Ministry, we call it a formal relationship. We have some Stephen ministers that in supervision sometimes will speak to a formal Stephen Ministry relationship where in supervision that relationship is talked about. Sometimes a Stephen minister will take on a second person, but they don't necessarily want to be under the formal umbrella of Stephen Ministry, but they just need somebody to walk alongside them just to care for a brief little bit of time. And so then that's not a formal Stephen Ministry relationship. You probably all have those kind of people in your life, right? Where you have an informal relationship. But when you're reporting about who Sherry has lined you up with, that's your formal Stephen Ministry relationship. The one nice thing, your care receiver in your relationship is going to look for you to define the relationship. That's when a lot of those boundaries come into play. You're going to help know how that relationship is going to move forward. You're going to help set the time of meeting. You're going to help set the time of, we are meeting for an hour. You are going to help understand what is a proper acceptance of a request, a proper decline of a request. You're going to set up some boundaries in it, and that caring relationship will be understood by both sides. So you kind of take the lead in the relationship, and then they tend to not push toward other things when you seem to set pretty firm boundaries. If you agree to pick up groceries for your care receiver, make it a one-time thing. If they're in a mode of, and tell them that up front, I can do that for you this week, but that's not what this ministry is about. I'm happy to do it this once, but this cannot be a regular thing, in our relationship. You can't always, kick it to the curb, but you could help, once. But again, don't let yourself get caught in over empathizing or overdoing in a relationship. Sometimes you might over identify with what they have going on in their crisis, and it's tugging at your heartstrings, and you go toward things way more than what you should. It's hard to back that up. It's hard to reverse once you've gone forward. Okay. So understand that you aren't obligated to say yes to requests that go beyond what Stephen ministers to. And in a way, it's uncaring because you're enabling. So you have to set those boundaries, as hard as that might feel sometimes. Always I found this paragraph in here to be interesting, and I'm going to read these questions. This kind of gets you thinking. Take into account what's best for everybody involved, for you and for your care receiver. Here's some questions to think about. Will saying yes to this request help the care receiver grow and find healing? Is the request actually an attempt to fix the problem, which we're not fixers, right? By focusing on results. You think your helping in this arena is going to fix what they got going on. Will you slip from servanthood to servitude, okay, if you say yes? So remember to stay focused on the process instead of some of these things are results. You're doing things to try to fix and get results. All right, let's talk about saying no to a care receiver's request. There might be times when you decide to say no. Although you have the right to decline, it may well be the most caring course of action. It's good to take your care receiver's special circumstances into account as you tell him or her no. Always be thinking they might be in a hard or tough, difficult emotional state. So your care receiver might feel or be feeling let down when you say no to a request. It might feel negative to them. And you can tell them, that you remember times like that too. And it might feel really magnified to them. A no might feel magnified. What can you do? Mostly it's best to be assertive. Be gentle and firm at the same time. You probably want to explain the reasons for your answer, and you can do that. Give it in an honest, caring, non-defensive way. Also take the time to pause and listen. If they have something that they want to interject in this discussion of you saying no, make sure they're heard. Okay, and then continue on with the conversation. Make sure they have a chance to talk about how they feel about your answer. Listen closely for misinterpretations. Okay, such as feelings of rejection. You're not rejecting. You're just setting a boundary. Okay. Gently tell your care receiver how you interpret the situation, and it might come up again at the next visit. Sometimes you have to let it sit. They need to think about it. You can approach it again and say, last time we discussed this. Are we feeling okay about this now? After you've had time, to think about the conversation that we had. Part of saying no too is realizing that maybe what they're requesting is beyond what you can give. You might need to press them on toward some other sort of help. What they're asking for is not something that you as a Stephen minister are going to do. You might need to push them toward another agency, some professional help, another organization, and that's okay. And again, bring these things up at your supervision time because you'll get a lot of good feedback in supervision. When you get to, I think it's module 11, when we talk about mental health resources, that you'll learn a lot more about different things that you'll look for in conversations and when it would go beyond what a Stephen minister can handle or do. Now, negotiating. Might be an easy yes, might be an easy no, and maybe you have to negotiate. Sometimes the best response to a request from a care receiver will be to negotiate a different solution. Instead of saying yes or no directly, find another option. An easy example might be that you're meeting with your care receiver and they decide they don't want to meet where you are meeting. Could we meet at your house instead? Yours being the Stephen ministers. I don't advise that. I would work toward negotiating a more neutral space. You know your own home. If people are going to be around, people might come in. It's just not the most ideal spot. It might be the ideal spot for you. If you know nobody's going to be home at your house and that seems like the best option, you can offer that up. But you might have to negotiate and talk about the best place for you to meet.
I could see that being hard to say, okay, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many
You're
times
home.
can you say, I got somewhere else I got to get to, or
Yep.
versus I have to now leave.
Right. I
If it's
think,
a more neutral.
yep, more neutral makes that easier. The one thing in setting boundaries is you are going to want to be careful with your time.
And now they know where you live.
Right. And now that you're exactly right. So, depending on how you want to look at those boundaries, it might be somebody that you know really well and going to your house is not going to be a big deal. But a neutral zone, it just depends on where it's at.
Yeah.
But negotiate it. If you don't feel like it's a good spot, negotiate a neutral zone. Be careful not to negotiate in a way that your care receiver thinks your continued care is contingent on making personal change to please you. That can also happen. Something you would not say, I almost had to laugh when I read this in here. It says, if a care receiver asks to change the day of your caring visits, don't say something like, if you start getting up earlier and working on your job search, as we discussed, then I'll consider it. Don't make it contingent on, if you this, then I'll that, kind of thing.
It's very parental.
It's parental. It's a little bit manipulative. It doesn't feel good. So when you make an assertive request, when you read in chapter 10, Speaking the Truth in Love, you saw that an acronym of DESC. And on Focus Note 2, page 117, it contains those 4 steps. Just to refresh, take a minute to read the DESC model of 4 steps in making a request.
I wish we were wired to talk like this by default.
Yeah. Well, it's a really useful model in all your relating, right? Not just with a care receiver. When you talk about the consequences of your request, it's always helpful to start in the positive, in the positive with that part of it. If you need to talk about negative consequences, be willing to follow through, on where you go with that. Focus Note 3 gives a good example in it. So the 2 describes exactly what they are. Focus Note 3 gives a really good example of those 4 parts, so you can take a second to read through exactly what that might look like. reading it for me fleshed it out even better than just reading
Yeah,
what it
I
is.
did.
When you read it, it really operates in the affirmative, right? Something that could have been tricky can be turned into something that, you know, is affirmative and positive and helps them see how things outside of Stephen ministry can be practical and helpful.
Well, and really helps them to solve their own problems.
Totally.
Too.
Yep. You're going toward that because you're not the
Mhm.
fixer of their problems. And if you can offer, you know, those types of things, it helps them think about, and exactly what you said, solve those problems.
I don't know if this is a good question or not, but it seems like, as I'm reading some of that, people could begin to want to look at you as a friend, but you're not necessarily wanting to step into that relationship. Yes?
Yes. It often ends in friendship. All of mine did. In one of them, I actually knew her quite well prior to being her Stephen minister. That was a trickier road to walk because we did know each other pretty well. And so to not have the discussions turn into a friend giving another friend possibly some advice, I had to work really hard to have that stay Stephen minister-esque. The other ones, not as much because I didn't know them as well to start out with. But it develops into that because of the trust that you build and the relationship that you build. But I would agree. And again, you're going to set the table in that relationship and in a way guide the discussion so that it doesn't necessarily turn into that all the time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Okay.
it depends so much on the care receiver, because if it seems like they're in a mature spot and they can handle assertiveness and the Stephen ministry boundaries, that's one thing. And then you can probably have friendship-esque kind of qualities in your relationship. But if you have a care receiver who's a needy person, or like Jurassic Park testing the fences all the time, then, you probably do need to keep that friendship piece separate.
That could be tricky.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
It can be tricky to navigate sometimes.
Because I just think about this whole thing about transportation. This is probably not the reason she got a Stephen minister, he, she, whatever. But now this is a whole nother little side piece, like they want help with.
Well, and
So it's not
this is a
their
theme
main
in the
problem.
examples. I mean, do you feel like this comes up a lot, or is it other more opaque things that you might have to be assertive about?
We've had it kind of run the gamut a little bit. We have had a Stephen minister where her care receiver is in a nursing home and wanting to watch our church, and the technology is not working to be able to watch church. Your heart can tug for that, right?
Sure.
And you want that to be something that they have. So we felt it was not beyond the boundaries for the Stephen minister to talk to the people that work at the nursing home to see if that was something that they could help provide, to get that online to help that care receiver on a Sunday morning be able to live stream or to watch. We didn't feel like that was out of the boundary zone. For our Stephen minister to go there at 8:45 and
be
get it
tech
all
support.
set up and be tech support,
Okay.
that's different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're trying to help facilitate in a situation where they can't facilitate themselves necessarily. And we talked about that in supervision. Was this okay? We felt like it was. So, but you know what I mean?
I know.
That's why we have each other, right? To be able to talk through these things. And when you report at supervision, you'll start to hear things at times come up, and it's okay in a way, in an assertive, loving, caring way to say, and sometimes even in a joking way, somebody will say, "Ooh, that sounds like you went about over the boundaries a little bit," or, you know, whatever. And it's a good check in people's spirit to say, we're watching out for you. We don't want you to overstep these bounds necessarily.
Everybody needs somebody in their life to keep them accountable.
So
Yeah.
and supervision is somewhat that. And I think it's good to ask those questions. This Stephen minister asked that question directly. Am I overstepping my
great.
bounds by X? So, all right, we're going to
That person wasn't asking. I mean, that person could have said, "I really don't want to do that," and the team would probably say, "Okay." I mean,
yeah, it could have been,
okay.
yeah. She felt a need to want to be able to do this for her
Okay.
carry
To
seeker.
advocate for the person.
Yes,
Okay.
because she really couldn't advocate for herself. And what she was trying was not working necessarily. And so maybe somebody different speaking into the staff's life
Okay, that makes
would be
sense.
beneficial, but not going there herself to set this up for her carry receiver.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, we get to practice a little bit. So you're going to gather in groups of 3, one group of 3, one group of 2. You'll have to do a little bit of shuffling on what we're going to talk about. You got to decide in your group of 3. So 3 can go out there, 2 can stay here, or whatever, vice versa. Decide who's going to be person A, who's going to be person B, and who's going to be person C. If you're in a 2-person group, you're just going to roll through, and you know what I mean. You might have to take 2 turns at being somebody. So here's what you need to do. You're going to talk through and practice some skills in assertively making, granting, refusing, and negotiating requests. There's no right or wrong. Kind of.
Judy's watching for us.
No, it's just interesting to see how you approach this. Some will be obvious, some will be less obvious. All right. So you're going to gather in your groups. I'm going to let you get to your spot in the first skill practice. So once you get out there, person A is going to be the Stephen minister using the DESC. So take your manual with you so you can kind of think about what those things are. And the Stephen minister is going to remain assertive. Person B, you're going to be the care receiver, and you're going to decide if you're going to be passive in your request or if you're going to be aggressive in your request. All right. You know what it means to be passive? Okay. Person C, you're going to be the reader of the situation, an observer, and then lead the discussion through the discussion questions at the end. And we'll bring each other back in. I mean, you can do that, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. Yeah, I'm not going to say a whole lot more. Focus note 4 gives the situation. So you're going to read through it, and you're going to work through what just happened. So let's just read situation 1 together. The Stephen minister and care receiver have met just about every Tuesday for the past 6 months since the care receiver's divorce. The care receiver prefers meeting on Tuesdays because child care is not an issue on that night. On the upcoming Tuesday, the Stephen minister's child will be singing in a choir concert at school. The Stephen minister would like to change the day of the visit so he or she can attend the concert. So the Stephen minister's making the request here. Okay? And the care receiver is going to respond. And you're going to be passive or you're going to be aggressive. And then person C, the reader, observer, discussion leader, is going to move you after these two have this interchange. In focus note 5, you're going to talk about how the conversation went. How did the Stephen minister feel about the conversation? How did the Stephen minister use the steps in making his or her request? So take a little time to think about, as the Stephen minister, your DESC, how are you going to make the request? Care receiver, you get to choose how you're going to be, passive or aggressive. And then in the end, how did the Stephen minister demonstrate assertiveness through the conversation? Or how could have the Stephen minister been more assertive? And if there's just two of you, talk about how your responses kind of were. Okay, how did you feel about how the care receiver
Sure.
responded?
So
Ladies,
we're
are you gonna?
We're gonna go through 4, or we're gonna go through 5.
You're gonna go through the situation I just read.
Yep.
Focus note 4.
Yep.
Then, when you have made your interchange, so person A, the Stephen minister, you're going to make the request about being able to go to the concert. Bob, if you two are working together, Bob's going to respond to the request, and he gets to decide how he's going to respond.
Right.
Is he going to be passive and go into this, oh, what am I, whatever, I don't know. And then the observer is going to work you through these questions, and just you're going to talk about and make some observations. Make sense? Okay, go to your spot.
Did you say we're heading out here?
There's 3 chairs out there. Okay, I'm going to give you, let's see, 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Oh, 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Which one do you want to be?
Just because I'm saying I'll be A, and then we'll just go natural. And
Okay.
B, and then we'll,
Okay.
Then you can switch it up.
So I read it and I know what's going on. So
And think about too how you're going to present it. Give
about
yourself
how you
the,
doing?
think about the
Good.
DESC
Good.
Don?
pieces. Okay, good.
You know, we've been meeting on Tuesday, and that's worked out really, really well. We've been going through this, and I really appreciate that. But my child's got a choir concert next time we meet on Tuesday night, and so I just wondered, I have a Monday night open or Wednesday night open. Just wondered if we could maybe change off of Tuesday just that one week and maybe meet at a different time.
You told me right in the beginning of this whole thing that we have to keep the same time all the time. And now you're the one that's trying to change it.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, because I'm normally try to be very prompt that way, and a good schedule is always, good discipline is always the best way to handle everything. I'm just wondering, just because of the specialness of this event, if there was any way we could make that adjustment. So
Yeah, I guess so. I understand what you're saying, and I understand that you want to go see your kid, but boy, it just seems like you're going against what you told me in the beginning. And I've been really careful not to have to change it.
We'll go back to Tuesday, right?
yeah, can I be honest with you? I can really appreciate that. I really, because that, I really did say that. So I guess I'm really grateful for your being flexible in this one situation. And I'll be honest with you, I'll try not to do that again. I appreciate it, but I'm going to take you up on that if we could. But I'm going to really make a better effort at
Good.
not
Well,
doing that again.
I've got Monday night next week.
Good. Let's plan on it. Whew! I threw me a curveball. I'm not sure how I handled that.
No, I know.
I'm not
that's
sure how
so
I
bad.
handled that. No,
Oh,
no, you
how-
threw me. No, I'm not. I'm not. I did the best I could. So I'm glad you kind of did that. But I don't know if I had that ability.
It happens. See?
Oh, yeah, I mean, because you're throwing right back at the person what they said to you.
Right, right.
And that makes it really difficult sometimes, because I've had that kind of situation.
I think this is just me thinking it out loud, not whether I'm right, but I think if I sense resistance that I wouldn't even ask. I would hope that I would be aware of. I would think in my own mind. I hope I'm relationship aware enough that if that situation really happened, then probably we're not in the relationship realm. We're probably not connecting as well as we maybe should be. So therefore, maybe
Come on back in here. Let's
ask
talk about it a minute. Then I'll send you on your
I
way.
think you did all of these.
Yeah, let's
things.
come back
Yeah,
and
This
chat about it a
is-
minute.
Oh, go ahead, say it.
See, but I don't know any, I mean, sometimes you just
She is gonna
get
be
to
top
something.
notch.
And here I was gonna say, if I smell like Brussels sprouts, I'm sorry.
I
Oh,
smell like my
Brussels
dinner
sprouts.
too from the crock pot. All right, those of you that were Stephen ministers, how did you assertively balance your own needs, feelings, and expectations with your care receiver's needs, feelings, and expectations? Talk about how it went.
I got caught.
Yeah.
Inflamed. Bob thought it was a good sport.
So you were aggressive?
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
See, that would
Like, what did you say?
Well,
I-
80% aggressive, 20% passive.
It'd be kind of fun to have us witness
No.
what they're doing.
It's really, you handled it well. And no, you don't feel like you do, but the conversation kept going.
It did.
Both spots, I didn't hear yours as much, but the negotiating piece came into play, right? And then you kind of learn what each other's expectations are a little bit too, because you have to talk about it. Because Bob was more aggressive.
How did he what did you say? Can we ask?
Yeah, you can ask.
Yeah, I
what was your-
said to Don, you're the one that said that we had to keep our schedule all the time in the same time.
Good one, good
And
one,
now
yeah.
you're the one that's changing it.
I no longer play nice.
I know how you act.
on the hot seat.
So what'd you say?
Well, caught me off guard. Because really, this is really easy scenario. It really is. It's real simple. Hey, would you like to change? Yep. And all of a sudden,
We're
Bob-
flexible.
You guys can't relate to this.
But Bob really, that's great. But I stepped back a second, I rethink. But I think what I did is I kind of regrouped because I knew the importance of that concert for my son. I knew what I wanted. So, first of all, you own the fact that you did say that, right? Because you did.
Mhm.
So now knowing that, we both admit to that being the case. I said, let's stay disciplined and stay in the same night. But now I also asked for special circumstances, and you pushed back at me. Now we both own that you want to push back, and I've asked. Now can we?
So
Okay.
what was your solution?
Oh, Bob gave it. Julie, I'm a salesman, doggone it. What do you think the answer
Well, it
is?
wasn't an irrational
No, it wasn't. It was
request,
personal.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And so I think people generally will wind up understanding that.
Right.
But at the moment, it maybe just kind of ticks them off a little bit or something.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and it throws them. If they're already struggling with something, now it feels like, now what?
The routine is broke. you
Yes,
think?
something is broke. Is this the beginning of something where maybe they're wondering if we should keep, who knows where their mind goes sometimes. And to flit out of the ordinary can throw people.
So when are you meeting now?
Monday night.
Which Don came back, which was great. And I think you guys did too. Don gave 2 options for other nights.
Wow.
That's a part of a negotiating tool, right? It's not like, I don't remember what you said, but it's not like I don't want to meet. I'm just wondering if we could do Monday night or Wednesday night. I have either of those available.
But it is so good because your impulse or your gut reaction could be to to be defensive and to think the worst, or your care receiver to think the worst. And it's even like, is it like the 5-second rule or the 15-minute rule or whatever it is? Don't send that email right away. 'Cause
Yep.
like 5 seconds later, you'll have calmed down and
Or
you
read
won't.
it to your spouse.
Right. and even this week, I found myself like, Molly had a dentist thing, and she came home and she's like, "Yeah, they want me to have this procedure done." And initially, I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna have to call the dentist, and why do they need to do this?" And like an hour later, I'm like, "I'll just call and get the appointment set up." Get the procedure done. I was like totally over it. So you just kind of have to like digest it.
Yeah.
I think you just have to digest it.
Yep. All right, let's move into the second one. Person A, going to switch. All right, this time person A. So Bob and you guys are going to have to decide again. But whoever was person A, the observer, or person A is now the observer, the reader, the leader. Person B moves into Stephen Minister mode. Okay. This time the Stephen Minister is responding to the request. Not giving the request, you're responding to a request from your care receiver.
Are we doing the same
All right.
situation or no?
Nope. And person C is now the care receiver who's making the request. So go to focus note 6. Read this scenario. Is it helpful if I read it to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The Stephen Minister and care receiver have been meeting for about 2 months, ever since the care receiver found out that he or she was being laid off. Tonight, the Stephen Minister plans to meet his or her care receiver for their weekly visit and then quickly head over to meet up with a lifelong friend who happens to be in town for the day. The Stephen Minister hasn't seen this friend in years, and tonight this is the only opportunity to get together. This is a little like what Julie was saying, since the friend flies out of town very early the next morning. Meanwhile, the care receiver has had a difficult day. The job search has been slow to produce promising leads, and today he or she received several bills in the mail that he or she isn't sure how to pay. With about 5 minutes left in the caring visit, the care receiver was still feeling overwhelmed and asked whether the Stephen Minister could extend their visit.
Now I gotta be the.
Okay.
You're the care receiver. I'm the
So you're
minister.
the care receiver's asking to extend the time. The Stephen Minister has to work through whatever assertive negotiation or not negotiation. Okay? Give it a shot. Give you a few minutes.
Okay, so we're at the end.
Right, we're at the end.
We've been talking. We've got only about 5 minutes left, and I'm getting antsy and looking at my watch and ready to go see this friend and lay it on me.
Bob, tonight's just been tremendous. I just really appreciate the time we shared, as I always do. But it's just, I don't know if you know how to handle it. I'm just in such a bad place. It's just got this news today. I'm just bewildered and confounded. I just am so lost and feeling empty. How do I, really own up to this with my wife and tell her she's been believing in me and we're going to walk this path together, and it looks so promising, and then today happens, and I just feel I don't have it. I'm in a bad spot right now, Bob. I'm just in a bad spot. I know our meeting's about ready to be done, but is there any way we can just stay for a little while and just continue to talk for a little while?
Don, I think I shared with you at the beginning that I was going to go see a friend who I haven't seen in years, so I'd really like to go see him. But I also really understand that you're in a bad spot. Do you think we could meet sometime tomorrow? What would work for you? I'm open tomorrow. I'd love the opportunity to sit down with you. You get a chance to sleep on it for a little while, tonight, and maybe things will look a little different in the morning, but can we somehow get together tomorrow?
I think we can, but before we leave, could we pray about that?
Sure.
I think it's just the best way to sound. I mean, that's what else you gotta do, right?
Judy like that. It's hard just getting
It's hard. I know. It's because
I'm
it's like,
sorry.
what are you gonna do?
We've all been there.
Just the way you turned around.
It's on camera too.
Bob
Oh.
plays for keeps, man.
I know. I worked for him.
Oh, that was good. I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
No, I do. Absolutely. I wondered how you would kind of wrap it up, and perfect, right? You stayed true to the commitment, both in the time, but also offered another option.
yeah.
And as real adults, I mean, you have to understand.
Yeah, and I
How long
think
you gonna stay till
generally
midnight, till
people
1
are-
o'clock? You know what I mean?
Generally, people are going, if something is reasonable, rational, people will go along with it, even if it takes a little bit of encouragement.
And in truth, if you know somebody's in a really bad spot, you know, if they are, you say, I have an appointment that I just can't break. But it's just a 2-hour commitment. Why don't I come back? And even if it's 10:30 at night,
too.
right?
Yeah.
Why don't I check on you at 10:30 at night? So that way you know, I mean, if it's that bad, you're going to always
I like
assess
that
the
too,
situation, right? You know, let me keep this commitment. You know, I want to, say any more than that, right?
But I'll give you a call.
Yeah,
later.
and I'll check on you. We don't have to be done.
Yeah, I like that too. Again, that whole negotiating,
Yeah, give and take,
because
right?
what you're doing is still telling that person that they're important.
All right, come on in. Let's talk about it as a group because this is so interesting. You guys are doing so good. You are doing so good.
Yeah.
We're gonna set a new bar when we join the big group.
You are. We brag about you all the time. So
We can sign up for improv.
That's all right.
Rosalie
this
for
is great.
president.
You should be.
All right, who cried? Who
She
cried?
did. She did.
That's what women do when they get under stress.
I hope you are okay.
Okay.
Wow.
Here we go.
I'm fine.
I didn't mean that.
Did anybody
Somebody really
Did
cried.
anybody say yes to the request?
No, because my friends
No?
are important.
No?
I said I could stay another 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay. So you said no, but negotiated a little.
That's passive.
The tears came, and I was like, okay, my friend could wait 5, 10 minutes, but then I have to go.
So share the reasons. Okay, so you said no. Technically, you said no. What were your reasons for saying no? Same thing here. You both can share. What were the reasons for saying no, you're not going to stay longer?
Well, I said I had a friend who said, is this what you're wanting me to?
Yeah.
I just explained I have a friend who I haven't seen, and they're flying out in the morning, and I told her I'd meet with her. And then the tears came, so I granted her 10 more minutes.
So basically, I said, well, I understand. I have to cry anyway. So
Hearing it there, it didn't. I was like, okay, but hearing it here just now, I'm like, that's probably making